I could feel the absence before I touched it. There was a strange lightness at the top of my head, as if the weight of years had been lifted without permission. My hand moved up slowly, already knowing. The tips of my fingers met something uneven, exposed like rough cloth, rubbed against the grain. I didn't pull back right away. I kept touching it, tracing the terrain where my hair had been. The bathroom mirror didn't lie. It rarely does. The silver I'd worn for the past 2 decades, curled softly every Thursday by Carol at Main Street Salon, was gone. In its place, jagged patches, tufts, clinging to scalp, like remnants of a story no one wanted to finish. My ears looked larger than I remembered, my jaw older. The comb on the sink still had strands wrapped around its teeth, like something had struggled and lost. My voice sounded hollow in the tile-walled room. No was all I could manage. I didn't cry. I stood. I looked. I held the edge of the counter because my knees had stopped listening. Adam's number was at the top of my call log. I pressed it. "Mornin', Mom. It's early. Wedding's not for a while." "Something happened," I said. Pause. "I need you to come over, now." There was a breath on the other end. "What's going on?" "Your wife came into my room last night. She cut my hair." The silence was immediate and sharp. "What?" "She cut it all off, Adam." I woke up. "Look, I don't have to prove it. Just come here." "Mom, that doesn't make sense. Whitney was with me all night. We were at the hotel. She could have come after you fell asleep. You think she snuck out, drove across town, and shaved your head? Are you hearing yourself?" I sat down on the edge of the tub. The phone buzzed in my hand. "I'm worried," he said finally. "Are you okay?" Like mentally, I didn't answer. "I'll come by," he added. "We'll figure it out." When the doorbell rang, I already knew she'd be with him. They came in like nothing had happened. She wore white, of course. Her hair curled into soft golden spirals. Perfect. The scent of vanilla and hairspray arrived before she did. "Oh my God," Whitney gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth like she'd rehearsed it. "What happened to your hair?" I didn't look at Adam. I looked at her. "You tell me." Whitney blinked. Her expression didn't change. "I don't understand." "You came here. You did this." Her hand touched her collarbone. "Marjorie, that's awful. I would never." Adam stepped in. "Mom, please. You sound paranoid." Whitney was asleep next to me. It doesn't add up." I pointed to my scalp. "This didn't fall out, Adam. It was cut. With scissors. Rough, rushed like someone didn't want me to see." Whitney tilted her head, a slight crease forming between her brows. "Could it be stress? I mean, hair loss is a real thing at your age." That word again, age. Always tossed out like it meant something more than time. Like it meant irrelevance. I didn't answer. I just looked. Whitney reached up and adjusted one of her curls. Her nails were painted a pale pink. She smiled small, only with the corners of her lips. That was when I knew. She turned to Adam. "Maybe the pressure's just getting to her. Today's a big day." Adam didn't touch me, didn't move closer. "Mom, I think you should see someone, just to rule things out." So polite, so careful, like I was a wine glass with a crack in it, waiting to shatter if someone breathed too hard. I stood in my own living room in my own house with my bare scalp and the woman who took it and the son who couldn't see her. Nobody asked me what I needed. They left after a while. Whitney said they had to get back to the hotel for makeup and final photos. She offered me the number of a wig shop. Affordable, she added. Like that would matter. When the door closed behind them, the echo stayed longer than it should have. I went to the mirror again. Not the bathroom one this time, the one near the coat rack. It showed my face in softer light, less brutal. But the patches were still there. I reached for the scarf, hanging on the hook, the one Judith had given me 2 winters ago, navy blue with thin white stripes. It still smelled faintly of cedar and hand lotion. I wrapped it around my head slowly, knotting it at the back. The knot felt like punctuation. Not the end of something, but a pause, a breath before turning the page. I walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the stove. No one had asked me if I would still attend the wedding. No one had said, "Don't come," either. But the message had already been sent. Quietly, under the skin, through the scissors. I leaned against the counter and stared out the small window above the sink. The tea kettle hadn't started humming yet, but the silence was full. And for once, I didn't reach to fill it. I don't remember when I first started whispering in my own house. Maybe it was the day I brought out the blue dress, the one with the small pearl buttons down the back, the waistline I had let out and sewn in again over the years. I'd always thought it elegant in a quiet way, something that stood politely without asking for attention. It might be better to go with something softer. Neutral maybe, Whitney had said, running her hand along the hem. So the colors don't compete. I folded the dress and placed it at the bottom of the drawer. The cardigan I chose instead was the kind you wear when you want to look present, but not pictured. The invitations came in a white envelope with rose gold trim. I opened mine at the counter, standing over a cup of tea that had already cooled. There was no RSVP card inside, only a line in fine cursive. "We're keeping the gathering small and focused. Thank you for understanding." I still ironed my slacks and polished my shoes just in case they changed their minds. When they picked the wedding cake, Whitney posted the photos on her story, 6 different tiers buttercream wrapped in flowers that looked too perfect to eat. I watched the clip twice before turning off the phone. I told myself it wasn't important. I told myself I wouldn't have known what to suggest anyway. The lasagna had been a favorite when Adam was younger. He'd come home from school and peek under the foil before even saying hello. After his father passed, I made it every Friday like a ritual that held the weeks together. One night after dinner, Whitney leaned over her half-full plate. "It's good," she said. "Just heavy. Maybe we keep it lighter next time." The foil stayed in the drawer after that. I donated the baking dish that month, said it was chipping too much. At a dinner once, I'd offered to help with dishes. Whitney smiled. "You're our guest tonight. You've done enough." Then handed me the dessert napkins to fold in the kitchen. Adam was telling a story about a work promotion. I couldn't hear the details from the sink, but I heard everyone laugh at the end. Later in the car, I said, "You didn't mention I used to pack your lunches every morning that year." He shrugged. "It's not really part of the story." I nodded. He was right. Not all details belong in a retelling. At Thanksgiving, Whitney told me I could bring rolls. Store-bought, preferably. She didn't want duplicates of the main things. I stood in the bakery aisle longer than necessary, choosing a package with sesame seeds, just to feel like I'd made a choice. When I arrived, the table was full. My rolls were placed at the far end, still in plastic. Adam pulled me aside in the hallway between coats. "Don't take it personally. Whitney's trying to make everything run smooth." I looked at the shoes piled near the door. One of them was mine, older plain, dusted with salt from the sidewalk. I tucked them further beneath the bench. "Of course," I said. There had been a phone call once about the guest list. I offered to make the programs or help organize the seating. "Oh, that's so sweet of you," Whitney replied. "But we're keeping the tone really streamlined." Streamlined. Like I was an extra word in a sentence that was running too long. I crossed my name off the list of things to bring. I stopped asking. Even the coffee mugs had changed. The last time I visited, I reached for the old green ceramic one with the small crack on the handle. Whitney gently moved it aside. "Let's use the new ones. It's better for photos." I drank from a white cup that looked like it had never been used. I placed it back carefully, making sure it left no trace. Sometimes Adam would ask why I'd been quiet lately. "I just want everything to go well," I would reply. He'd nod, distracted checking his phone. "You always make things easy, Mom. That's what I love about you." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a condition. The cardigan I wore to the rehearsal dinner had a small stain on the cuff. I turned the sleeve inward and sat in the back row next to an uncle who didn't remember my name. I clapped when others clapped. I smiled when someone looked my way. I laughed when laughter was needed, soft and delayed, like following a rhythm that didn't belong to me. The evening ended with a photo. "Family only," they said. I held everyone's coats by the folding chairs. I ironed them before handing them back. Adam passed me mine last, like an afterthought. "Thanks for helping out." I wanted to ask, was I in any of them? But I already knew the answer. I folded the cardigan that night and placed it at the bottom of the suitcase. Beneath it, the blue dress stayed untouched, still folded the way Whitney had done it weeks before. The pearl buttons left small impressions in the fabric, like they'd tried to hold their place but didn't press hard enough. I stared at those impressions longer than I meant to. Then I zipped the case and sat on the edge of the bed. There are many ways to disappear. Some are loud, abrupt, final. Others happen gradually through gentle suggestions. Closed invitations, the quiet redirection of a hand on your sleeve. I didn't fight any of it. I thought that made me kind. Now I wonder if it only made me convenient. I always thought I'd grow old quietly, not invisibly. The wig itched. Not just at the scalp, but around the edges, where the skin thinned with time and memories used to sit. I removed it slowly, like peeling back a truth no one had asked to hear. The inside of the lining was warm, still holding the shape of my day. I set it on the vanity next to my wedding ring. The band hadn't fit in years, but I still kept it close. A gold circle worn soft at the edges, the underside marked with a shallow dent where it used to press against a callus on my finger. The scalp beneath felt tender. I reached for the jar of unscented cream and smoothed a small amount along the skin. Circular, careful movements, like I was apologizing to myself. There was a folded note on the bedside table tucked beneath an old church bulletin. Judith's handwriting. I hadn't opened it since her funeral. The ink had faded slightly at the corners. "If one day you find yourself missing from the photo, just remember you were once the whole picture." She'd written that without irony. Judith never said anything just to fill silence. She always believed words were like salt, enough to bring flavor, but too much and everything spoiled. Adam had given a speech once after receiving that scholarship for law school. They'd asked him who inspired his work ethic. I learned everything from Doug, he said into the microphone. Watching my father-in-law build a practice from the ground up, it's what shaped my ambition. I remember holding my breath through the applause. My name didn't appear in the program, just the groom's side. No one asked why I was sitting in the back. At Ava's birthday last year, the cake had white frosting, pale pink roses. The candles were shaped like tiny ballet shoes. Whitney leaned over her daughter, smiling for the photo. "To our darling girl," she said, "loved by everyone in this family." I clapped quietly. Adam kissed Ava's cheek. Someone handed me a plate already sliced. No one made eye contact. Later, when they posted the pictures, I saw the frame where I'd been cropped out, just a blur of beige sleeve left behind. The same cardigan I'd worn that day now sat folded on the bed. A faint stain from hot chocolate clung to the hem. I hadn't bothered to scrub it out. Some things are meant to stay. The hair, that silver wave I'd once looked at in the mirror and thought, you've made it. I remember the first time I had it professionally styled, a year after Frank died. The salon had been quiet on Tuesdays, and the stylist Janice, I think, had said, "Let's keep the curl soft, not too tight. You want movement." I didn't know then what I wanted, just that I needed something that said I hadn't been erased. Judith had come with me. She waited by the door with her arms folded, pretending to read a magazine. When I stepped out of the chair, she smiled without teeth and said, "There she is." I held that look for months. Every Sunday, I'd run a comb through it before church. Every Tuesday, I'd reheat coffee and think, you can still choose how you look, even if you can't choose how they see you. Until this morning, when I woke up and realized someone had chosen for me. The scissors were in the kitchen trash. Not the good ones. The old pair from the junk drawer. Orange handle, one side stiff with rust. I saw them, buried beneath a used napkin and a piece of foil. A few silver strands still clung to the hinge. I didn't pull them out. Just stared for a while. The trash hadn't been taken out. That's how I knew it wasn't imagined. Whitney's voice still echoed faintly in my head from earlier. Maybe it was just stress. These things happen. Her fingers had brushed her own hair as she spoke. Deliberate. Not nervous, not fidgeting. Smooth and practiced. Adam hadn't looked at me. Not once. He glanced toward the floor, toward his keys, toward the dog barking across the street. Anywhere but me. "Let's not blow this out of proportion." That's what he'd said. I stood there in my own house on the morning of my only child's wedding, wrapped in a scarf that wasn't part of any outfit I had planned. No one had noticed the pale mark at the base of my neck where the clippers had dragged. No one had asked why the mirror in my room was turned to face the wall. Not one person had said, "We're sorry." The hair now gone had meant nothing to them. But to me, it had been something I kept control of. One small choice in a life full of accommodation. When Judith died, I found her old journals. She had written a single line across one of the back pages. Disappearing can happen slowly, like fog on a windshield. I folded the note back into the church bulletin and slid it into the drawer. I didn't need anyone to tell me what had been done. I just needed to decide whether I'd let them do it again. I never liked the way synthetic hair felt against the nape of my neck. Too warm, too quiet. Like something that shouldn't be there but didn't know how to leave. The ballroom chairs were gold with white cushions. Mine wobbled slightly. I sat still so it wouldn't creak. Margaret slid in beside me just before the music started. Her scarf smelled like lavender sachets, the kind people keep in drawers for years. "I thought you'd be closer to the front." My shoes touched the floor too flatly. I kept my knees tight heels together. My name tag said Marjorie Ellis, but the font was faint, almost smudged. I slipped it into my purse. Tradition isn't what it used to be. Margaret didn't smile, just nodded once, and looked straight ahead. Whitney's entrance was met with soft gasps. Lace sleeves, a veil that shimmered under the downlights. Her father handed her off with ceremony. The photographer crouched and captured the handoff with urgency, like something rare was passing between them. The officiant read from a small card. "Today we honor the union of not just two people, but two families." No mention of mine. No pause for me. I heard someone whisper behind me. "That's her mother-in-law, I think," and another replied. "Which one?" Adam stood to speak. The microphone buzzed. He cleared his throat, adjusted it slightly, looked down at his folded notes. "I've been blessed with support from incredible people in my life," he began. "Mentors, family friends, people who taught me how to build a life." He looked up briefly. Our eyes met for half a second. Then he turned back to the paper. To Doug. "Dad, you gave me my first shot. You trusted me when I wasn't sure of myself. Applause. Brief, but proud. To Denise for making me feel like your son from the start. You showed me what generosity looks like day after day. More applause. Longer this time. I rested both hands on my lap to keep them from trembling. Margaret leaned in. Did I miss something? I shook my head just once. The silence between each of his thanks stretched longer than necessary. It began to feel like deliberate omission, like someone skipping a name on a guest list twice. The woman 2 chairs over tapped her husband's arm. He didn't mention his mom, she whispered, not quietly enough. He shrugged. Maybe she didn't do much. I reached for my cup of tea. It had gone cold. The cup left a ring on the napkin. I folded it in half to hide the mark. They moved on to the cake cutting. The band started playing a soft, instrumental version of What a Wonderful World. Someone clapped offbeat. Whitney posed in front of the table, knife in hand, and said loud enough for everyone, "This morning, my mother-in-law thought I snuck in and shaved her head in her sleep. Isn't that wild laughter?" A few gasps. Someone at the corner table shouted, "Did she really say that Whitney feigned innocence?" She looked me straight in the eye like I'd done it. I mean, I laughed, but I was honestly worried. More laughter. A voice from behind. Maybe it's stress or age. Things slip. Someone else, that's not stress. That's something deeper. Someone should check on her. I sipped the tea anyway. It scraped the back of my throat. I moved the scarf higher, covering the seam where the wig met my skin. The elastic band had started to itch again, but I didn't touch it. At the reception table, a waiter lit candles in small glass jars. One flickered out. He tried to relight it 3 times, then gave up. Margaret nudged me with her elbow. "Are you all right? I'm not in the photograph," I said. "What photograph?" "The one they're taking next. Just family." She frowned, looked toward the head table. "But you are family. They didn't plan a seat for me. That was the first clue." She didn't respond, but I felt her hand touch mine lightly, just once. Later, they began arranging chairs near the floral arch. Whitney's mother adjusted her hem, smoothed her hair, called out to the photographer, "We'll start with our side." Adam stood in the middle, waiting. A child, one of Whitney's cousins, ran up and clung to his leg. He picked her up and laughed just as the flash went off. A young woman with a clipboard asked, "Do we have everyone?" Someone pointed toward me. "She's over there." Whitney didn't look. The clipboard woman asked, "Should we?" Whitney replied without turning her head, "No, that's all right." I stepped back instinctively. Behind the last row of chairs. No one followed. The shutter clicked 3 times. The group broke apart into smiles and small hugs. I pressed my palm to the front of my dress, feeling for the napkin with Margaret's cookie still folded inside. I hadn't eaten it. The wig had slipped slightly by then. I didn't fix it. A small curl of synthetic hair tickled my temple, reminding me of something lost, but not enough to grieve. At the end of it all, the lights brightened slightly for cleanup. Margaret stood, adjusted her scarf, and offered to walk out together. I waited, pretending to fix the strap of my shoe. When she left, I remained still. Judith once wrote to me, "If they write you out of the story, don't beg for a line. Let the silence be your signature." I stayed until the last candle went out. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even grief. It was the soft click of the drawer when I closed it for the final time, wood sliding into wood, a motion without ceremony. I packed light. A chipped teacup with the blue rim worn thin. A photograph of Adam at 5'1" sock, missing arms, looped tightly around my neck. A letter from Judith folded 3 times, the ink faded to moss green. She had underlined a sentence twice. "When they forget your name, let silence remember it for you." I left the casserole dish that had never been returned. The guest towels still sealed in plastic. the box of ornaments I hadn't been asked to hang in nearly a decade. The living room looked untouched, like a showroom no one entered anymore. I didn't pull the shades. Dust settled on the windowsill as if it had a right to be there. At Harold Brandt's office, I waited for the clock to stop ticking. He hadn't changed. Same salt and pepper tie, same cautious tapping of fingers against polished wood. "You're sure about removing Adam?" He didn't look at me when he said it. His pen hovered above the form. "All of it goes to the scholarship. For single mothers. Especially those studying nursing. No fallback beneficiaries, no." He hesitated. Sometimes regret looks like resolve in its early stages. I've had enough years to know the difference. He slid the paper forward. I signed. The ink bled a little on the second signature line. I pressed harder on the third. He handed me a manila envelope with copies. I didn't take it. "Send it to my new address when you get it," I said. He nodded once. The air outside felt cooler, but I didn't button my coat. At the real estate office, Lois Granger wore a red blouse I had complimented years ago. She didn't remember. She pushed a clipboard toward me and asked if I wanted staging. No open houses, no signs. Quiet buyer if possible. "You've lived there for 32 years. Not all of them felt like mine." She offered tea. I didn't touch the cup. I left the manila folder on the edge of her desk and walked out without looking back. Back home, I opened the linen closet. I took the gray cardigan with the stretched sleeves and the missing middle button. I wore it the day Adam sang in his second-grade recital. He looked for me in the crowd. That was the last time he searched for my face in a room. The donation pile grew quickly. Cookbooks with worn spines, scarves no one remembered, the guest blankets still folded like hotel linen. I found Judith's lace curtain pressed in the back of the cedar chest. It smelled faintly of rosewater and dust. I placed it on top of her letter. The message I imagined from Adam never came. No missed calls. No voicemail. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Kinney, waved as I stacked boxes on the porch. "You moving, Marjorie?" "Just making room. For what I'll know when I see it." She nodded like she understood. But I don't think she did. Mr. Haskins, still in his gardening gloves, stood at the edge of my walkway. "Not coming back. There's nothing left to return to." "You didn't even say goodbye." I said what needed saying, just not out loud. He bent down and plucked a weed from the sidewalk as if that small act might explain something. I wrapped the photograph of Adam in one of my old scarves. His face was rounder, then his smile less careful. He had drawn a crooked sun in blue marker on the frame's corner when he was 6. I never cleaned it off. I placed the mailbox key in a plain white envelope. No note. The pantry held one jar of apricot jam. It had been there since spring. I left it untouched. Judith once told me that walking away doesn't always look like movement. It can be the moment you stop waiting for someone to notice you're standing still. I wiped the counters one last time. The sponge caught on a small chip in the laminate. A coffee ring marked the corner where I used to read the morning paper. I touched it lightly. It was still faintly warm from the afternoon sun. No one came by. No one asked where I was going. The phone stayed quiet, a silence so whole it felt like intention. The driver from the donation center loaded the last of the boxes into the truck. He didn't ask what was inside. He didn't look at my face. I left the porch light on. Lois would come by for the keys. I didn't lock the front door. I didn't feel the need to. As I stepped into the garden for the last time, I paused beside the rosemary bush. The leaves had overgrown the walkway. I brushed my fingers across them once. The scent lingered on my skin. In the hallway, the mirror caught my reflection. My face looked sharper than I remembered, less blurred by softness, more carved by choosing. I stood there for a while, holding the scarf that used to match the cardigan. My hand didn't tremble. There was no announcement, no confrontation, no raised voices. I didn't argue. I withdrew. I didn't expect the sheets to smell like cedar. I thought maybe they'd carry dust or bleach or some hint of mothballs, but not this. Not the warmth of something kept, not discarded. I unfolded my clothes slowly, smoothing each one as I placed it inside the drawer Nina had emptied for me. There weren't many. A sweater with the elbows softened thin, 2 cardigans, a nightgown with one tiny mended seam. I laid them in a line like artifacts, unsure if they belonged to the present or the past. The attic room wasn't large, but the window was. I could see trees dark green and still. A bird rested on the windowsill briefly, then flew off. No sound. No one calling me downstairs. No voice asking where the scissors were. No tray of lukewarm breakfast to pretend was thoughtful. I opened the small suitcase and placed 3 items on the desk. The wooden comb, my sister's final letter, and the photograph of Adam when he was 5, missing a front tooth. Both his arms curled tightly around my neck. His little shoe was in the frame. I hadn't noticed that before. Nina knocked gently. "They've got peaches at the farmer's market. Want to come?" I nodded. On the drive into town, she hummed to a tune on the radio I didn't recognize. Her hands were steady on the wheel, her sunglasses tilted slightly from where she'd fixed them with a piece of tape. At the fruit stand, I picked up a plum and pressed it near my cheek. It smelled like childhood. My hands trembled for a second, then steadied. I tucked the plum into the basket. Tina Morales worked at a salon just off the main road. Nina opened the door like it was an old habit. "This one's due for some care," she said with a lightness I hadn't heard in years. Tina held my gaze in the mirror. "How do you feel about starting over?" I didn't answer, but I let her touch my scalp. Her fingers were firm, not tender, honest. She trimmed carefully, then stepped back. "We'll grow it healthy again." Later, as I stepped off the chair, I caught my own reflection in the side mirror of Nina's car. It wasn't dramatic, nothing remarkable, but I looked returned. Back at the house, Nina had made something that smelled like cinnamon and cloves. She handed me a cup of tea in a chipped mug shaped like a pumpkin. "These old things," she laughed, tapping the rim. I didn't say anything. I ran my finger along the crack in the glaze. The next morning, I followed her to the library, where a group of women were discussing a book I hadn't read. They welcomed me without question. One of them, Doris, offered a cookie. Another leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry, I never finished the book either." No one asked what I did before. No one asked why I was here now. I sat in that circle with my hands folded and listened to their stories about grandchildren. Stubborn knees, a neighbor's dog. I laughed once quietly. It came out of me like steam from a kettle long gone cold. In the corner of the library, I found a small corkboard where people pinned handwritten notes. "Free piano lessons. Need help with groceries. Lost cat, answers to pickle." I pinned up a piece of paper. "Free reading help for kids. Tuesday mornings. Ask for M." I didn't tell anyone what M stood for. At night, I lay on the twin mattress and reread Judith's last letter. Her handwriting had never changed, not even after the surgeries. Slanted a little stubborn, like her voice. If one day you find yourself sitting quietly in a room and no one calls your name, not out of cruelty, but out of certainty that you're no longer part of their design, get up anyway. Leave before they realize the room is dimmer without you. The heater clicked on with a soft groan. I traced the crease in the letter with my thumb. The next day, I washed the small kitchen counter and wiped the mugs dry. Nina came in and opened the window, letting in the scent of damp pine. "Feels like you've been here a while," she said, pouring coffee, "just long enough to forget what day it is." She smiled. "That's the best kind of time." The telephone rang once. She looked at the caller ID and didn't pick up. "Telemarketers," she said, returning to her seat. I didn't ask to see the screen. Later that afternoon, the mail arrived. Just coupons and one envelope addressed to Nina. I held it in my hands a second too long before realizing it wasn't mine to open. I placed it carefully on the credenza by the door. My phone buzzed once in the drawer. I didn't check it. The silence had weight and I didn't want to drop it. At dinner, we ate lentil soup from mismatched bowls. Mine had a small chip on the rim, just enough to feel it with my lips. Nina handed me a napkin and said, "You don't talk much, huh?" "I'm still listening to everything I didn't say." She nodded. "That counts." Before bed, I placed the photograph back inside the drawer. I didn't need it looking at me just yet. I combed my new hair shorter now, shaped growing in a direction I chose. The wooden teeth of the comb ran smoothly through it, no snags. I folded the cardigan at the end of the bed. The tag was coming loose and I made a mental note to fix it, though I didn't write it down. Some things weren't urgent. Some things waited. The sky outside the window was a deepening blue, almost velvet. No one had asked where I was. No one had said, "Come back." And I didn't miss the invitation. I didn't expect the house listing to echo louder than my absence. The papers had been filed, the keys returned, the door closed for the last time. I left no note on the fridge, no instructions for the plants. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday. By Thursday morning, my phone lit up like it hadn't in months. "Lois says you're selling the house." The voice stumbled a little, as if trying to find the right temperature. I took a slow sip from the chipped blue mug Nina had offered me that first night. The tea had gone cold. "That's right, I've moved." There didn't seem to be anyone who needed to know. There was a silence on the other end, not the kind that waits for more, but the kind that disapproves. "Whitney thinks you're overreacting. I mean, your hair's growing back right." I looked over at the wooden comb resting on the dresser, its teeth still catching bits of silver in the morning. I didn't touch it. The call ended with a half laugh and a rushed, "Well, just don't do anything permanent." But permanence had already been set into motion. Later that afternoon, another number rang in. A slower voice, measured and clipped. "I've been informed about your withdrawal from the family unit. It reflects rather poorly on the Kerrs, I must say." I glanced out the window toward the pine trees that didn't know my name. I let the receiver rest between my fingers until the line went dead on its own. That night I found a message waiting. "If you need anything, just say so. But really, you should act like an adult." The sender's name was Whitney. The punctuation was pristine. Not a word out of place. I deleted it without reading it twice. Nina looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Everything okay?" I shrugged, placed the phone's screen down and reached for the kettle. She didn't press. She never did. That's why I had chosen this attic room and her cinnamon-scented kitchen. When I opened the drawer the next morning, the envelope was still there. Judith's handwriting looked steadier than mine had in years. Her words had grown softer over time, more like a mirror than a torch. "People will come to you when you're useful, not when they miss you." I folded the letter again and slid it behind a stack of grocery coupons. I didn't need to reread it just yet. By noon, the voicemail box had 2 new recordings. "Mom, can we talk? Maybe you need a break, but this is too far." And from someone I hadn't heard in ages, Janine, my sister-in-law. Not to intrude, but I saw the listing online. "Are you—" "All right," I didn't reply. I didn't owe shape to their concerns. I spent the afternoon at the local library flipping through books I wouldn't check out, pausing at covers I'd never read. A young girl sat across the table, drawing something in blue crayon on her notebook, a flower with too many petals. She glanced at me and smiled, not recognizing my face. It felt like air. At home, Nina handed me a piece of mail. "Looks official," she muttered, already moving on. It was a forwarded letter from the family's financial advisor, a reminder about an annual meeting regarding the shared trust. I traced the envelope's seal with my finger, then dropped it in the trash with the peel of a bruised apple. On Saturday, during the farmer's market, I heard my name in a voice that hadn't aged well. "Marjorie, I thought you left town." I turned slowly. Miriam Harper, PTA queen turned real estate speculator. Her eyes scanned my clothes, my hair, the absence of foundation on my cheeks. "I'm just simplifying," I said. She sniffed. "Well, I always thought you were more grounded. But maybe you're just having a moment." A moment? I bought cinnamon honey and walked away before she could dissect me further. That evening, Nina prepared soup and we ate in silence except for the sound of her spoon tapping the side of the bowl. She didn't ask about the calls. She didn't mention the names. That more than anything was mercy. I found myself rereading a section in Judith's letter where she wrote about being the last one to leave the room even when the lights go out. I had done that too many times waiting for someone to notice I was still standing there. The new room smelled of old books and pine needles. My sweater folded over the back of the chair carried the faintest trace of gardenia from a bottle I hadn't replaced. My phone lit up once more, this time a picture message. Adam and Whitney at brunch, grinning, clinking mimosas. The caption read, "Wishing you a restful Sunday wherever you are." There was no question in the message, no invitation, no seat held open. I stared at the screen for a moment, then pressed delete. Not a trace of hesitation. Later that night, Nina tapped the edge of her mug and looked at me. "You didn't deserve all that." I folded the dish towel and placed it precisely on the counter. "Maybe not," I replied. "But I survived it." And I thought then surviving wasn't just about staying. Sometimes it was knowing exactly when to leave and meaning it. I don't hear that voice in my head anymore, the one that used to ask, "Did I go too far?" or "Should I call first?" It's been quiet lately, and that silence feels earned. The mug I use each morning has a thin crack down the side, not enough to leak, just enough to catch the light differently. I don't rotate it anymore to hide the flaw. I hold it with both hands now deliberately, as if the warmth might remind my skin that it still belongs somewhere. The tea leaves settle before I do. I stir with a spoon that once belonged to Judith. She never liked stainless steel, always claimed silver had memory. Maybe that's why it tarnishes. Maybe that's how it grieves. The notebook stays open on the kitchen table, soft leather cover, darkened edges. Inside are lists. Not of groceries or birthdays, but sentences I wish I had said, and ones I'm glad I never did. I write in it without editing. That in itself is a kind of revolution. At the library, children lean in when I read. Their faces open the way unopened mail never does. One girl hair in 2 uneven braids asked if the character in the book was a real mom or just pretending. I didn't answer. I just turned the page. Nina thinks I should decorate the room more. I haven't told her, but I like the emptiness. It gives my things more room to breathe. The comb with the missing tooth stays on the dresser. It doesn't snag anymore, not since my hair grew in. The wig is gone. I gave it to a donation bin near the co-op. Someone else can try being someone else for a while. The first message came while I was folding dish towels. "We're having a baby. You'll be a grandmother." No name. Just a voice trying to sound cheerful and practiced. I stared at the towel in my hands. Sunflower print faded in the corners, and waited for the second part. It didn't come. 3 days later, another call. "We know it wasn't fair, but families move past things. We hope you can too." No mention of scissors. No apology. No chair pulled out for me this time. Just the implication that enough time has passed for forgetting to be polite. I answered the next one. I hope it's a healthy baby. There was a pause. Then, maybe you could fly out. Meet the little one when they're here. I took a long sip from my cup, the one with the chip under the handle. I'm not booking seats at tables I'm not allowed to speak at. Silence. Then, so you're choosing to stay away. I'm choosing to stay. The line clicked. I turned off the phone. Nina didn't ask what happened. She set down a plate of sliced pears beside me and pointed to a word puzzle in the paper. This one stumped me. 7 letters. Means no longer needed. I wrote in replaced. Later that afternoon, I shelved picture books in the reading room. My hands moved slowly, not out of hesitation, but care. Spines should be treated the way some people treat memory, gently, with the understanding that wear means use, not weakness. A boy dropped his juice box and looked up like he expected punishment. I handed him a napkin and crouched down. Everyone spills something eventually. He nodded and walked away, holding the sticky cardboard like it still mattered. In the break room, someone mentioned their mother-in-law was visiting. She criticizes everything. Last time she asked if I made the pasta or just opened a box. The others laughed. I smiled. Someone turned to me. Do you get along with your daughter-in-law? I folded the edge of my napkin slowly. We understand each other now. That evening I reread Judith's last letter. I knew the folds by heart. In the margin, she had scribbled something not meant for print. Freedom isn't leaving, it's not waiting for permission to go. I underlined it again, not because I forgot, but because the ink was starting to fade. Whitney sent a text. No preamble. I hope you'll reconsider. The baby should know you. I stared at the screen for a while, then locked it and placed it face down next to the lamp. The lavender sachet beneath my pillow still held its scent. I pressed it gently, like it could answer questions I no longer asked. At the book club, someone brought brownies, and we discussed a novel about a woman who disappears and leaves behind a drawer full of unsent letters. No one asked why she never mailed them. They just said, I get it. When the group turned to me for an opinion, I simply nodded. Sometimes silence speaks louder than postage. On the walk home, I passed a florist's display. The peonies were beginning to droop. A sign read, half price end of bloom. I bought one. Not to revive it, just to carry it the rest of the way. In the kitchen, I placed it in a glass jar, let it lean as it pleased. It didn't have to look perfect to mean something. I didn't wipe down the counter that night. I let the ring of tea dry beside the notebook. Tomorrow it would remind me that I had sat and thought and chosen not to explain myself. There's a difference between being dismissed and walking away. And I finally knew which one I had done. I've always believed paper carries weight long after ink dries. Not physical weight, something quieter, like the way silence sits in a room once someone leaves. The pen they handed me at Harold's office was heavier than it needed to be. Gold trim initials etched. It left a thin black line where I signed my name twice first for the scholarship's release, then to confirm Adam would receive nothing more. The final document read, The Judith Fund, Renewal for Silent Mothers. I didn't stay for the closing remarks. I nodded once and walked out with the envelope tucked into my coat pocket like a heartbeat I didn't want to feel. Inside were 3 items, a photograph of Adam with cake on his face, the official waiver of inheritance, and a note torn from the edge of a grocery list. No envelope inside the envelope. Just folds. Soft, familiar folds. When you truly need your mother, I'm still here. But I won't live in silence just to keep a seat. At the post office, I chose regular mail. No tracking, no receipt. No way to prove it was ever sent. The woman behind the counter wore a sweater with a pine tree on it, even though it was spring. Her name tag said Hope. She didn't ask what was inside. I didn't tell her. When I dropped it into the slot, the metal door thudded shut behind it. I stood there a moment longer than necessary, hands still cupped. Back home, I took the cedar box from beneath the bed. The latch stuck. Dust had settled into the corners. Inside, a stack of photographs curled with time. Adam in a cardboard robot costume. Whitney holding up a report card. A letter from 3rd grade addressed to the best mom. I put them all back and taped the box closed with clear masking tape. On top, I wrote with a black marker, "Keep, but don't carry." I slid it behind the extra laundry detergent on the top shelf. Not hidden, just out of reach. Nina stepped into the room with a bag of sugar paused in the doorway and tilted her head. "You're still holding on to that. I keep it to remember how much I gave, not to ask for anything back." She didn't nod, just set the sugar down and walked out with slow steps that didn't echo. That evening, my phone lit up with a message from Whitney. "Do you really think you're that noble? No punctuation, no name, just static dressed as words." I deleted it without opening. Preview was enough. I made tea in the chipped mug I'd used since arriving. The crack in the handle hadn't widened. I still traced it sometimes with my thumb. The kettle sputtered before the whistle like it was about to cry, but thought better of it. I poured the water and didn't stir in anything. No honey, no milk, just heat and waiting. The brown leather journal sat beside me. I opened to a fresh page and wrote the words slowly, "I am no longer waiting to be asked." Below it, a thin line, not underlining, just closure. I didn't draw hearts or corners. I closed the book and left it where it was. A few days later, a small envelope arrived. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. Inside was a sonogram photo labeled "Baby Cur." No message. Just grayscale curves and the quiet claim of biology. I placed it inside the drawer that held expired coupons and old appliance manuals. I didn't label anything. At the library that Saturday, a child handed me a paper flower folded from the checkout receipt. "It's for your hair," he whispered and ran off. I didn't put it in my hair. I tucked it into the brown leather journal. When I flipped the pages again that night, it pressed flat between entries. A reminder that some things are given without condition. In the mirror, my hair touched the edge of my jaw, uneven, slightly curled where the scissors had slipped. I hadn't used a stylist in months. I preferred the quiet sound of my own decisions. At lunch, Nina passed me a bowl of stew across the table. "You always sat at the end," she said, spoon clinking against ceramic. "Even when it was your birthday, it felt like the safest place. No one sees the person at the end." "I know." She poured more water into my glass. I let it fill. That afternoon, I folded old towels and tucked them into a drawer with lavender sachets. One towel had a small bleach stain in the corner, shaped like a crescent moon. I didn't throw it out. In the early evening, I walked through the park. The wind blew against my face, but didn't push. I passed a bench where 2 young women laughed, one of them balancing a coffee cup on her knee. I didn't look too long. I just noticed how their bodies leaned inward, like they trusted each other with gravity. I reached the little garden behind the church. Rosemary, thyme, and scattered blooms. I inhaled and held it there for a second longer than breath required. Back inside, I opened the drawer where I'd kept Judith's old recipes. They smelled of cinnamon and ink. I didn't read them. I closed the drawer again with both hands gently, like closing a letter not meant for mailing. Later, I placed my keys in the ceramic bowl beside the door, set my phone on the charger, and moved the tea mug to the sink. I didn't check for messages. I didn't hope for an apology. I stood by the window as the streetlights flickered on, watched the moths gather at the glow, and in the stillness between one breath and the next, I thought only this: the door is closed, but it's not locked, and I am not waiting behind it. I never realized how loud silence could be until it stopped feeling like a threat. I sliced the orange peel slowly, watching the curl fall into the kettle of hot water, already tinted by the tea leaves. It wasn't a recipe, just a habit. I picked up something I did only when no one else would drink it. The kettle hissed softly on the counter, and I rested my hand beside it, feeling the warmth seep into my palm through the porcelain. There was no voice calling from upstairs, no door creaking open behind me, just the steady sound of a spoon clinking against ceramic. The tea turned a faint gold. I didn't rush. I didn't count minutes. I poured it slowly into the ivory mug with the chipped handle, the one no one else ever chose. It fit my fingers perfectly. In the corner, the olive green armchair sat where I'd left it angled just slightly toward the window. I placed my book there earlier, face down spine, balanced across the arm like a promise I meant to keep with myself. The floor didn't creak the same way as the one I left behind. No one had asked about the house listing, not since the papers were finalized, not since I signed my name and walked out without leaving a forwarding note. Outside, the neighbor, Mrs. Carlin, was watering her daisies, her hose curled like a sleeping cat on the gravel. She looked up, caught my eye, and offered a wave that didn't ask for anything in return. I nodded. A brief tilt of my chin, a smile that didn't strain. The phone rang. One sharp ring, then another. I didn't flinch. The name Adam Ellis lit up the screen. I watched it flash twice, 3 times. Then the room returned to stillness. I carried my tea to the chair, setting the mug on the small table where a single coaster waited, stitched with faded yellow thread. I sat the cushion gently dipping under me. The tea steamed toward my face. I didn't blow on it, just watched. The scissors Whitney used had been dull. I remember that now. I remember the way the blades tugged instead of slicing. Her fingers dug into my scalp, not hard enough to bruise, just enough to claim. She stood behind me in that white dressing room, laughing at something Lois said about cleaning house. I caught my own eyes in the mirror. They didn't blink. Now that scene flickered across my memory like a paused film, unedited, undisturbed. I sipped my tea. The heat lingered behind my teeth. From the drawer, I pulled out a worn envelope, creased and yellowed. Inside, Judith's handwriting, curved like a trail in the woods. There will come a day when you'll make tea, not to soothe anyone, not to wait for anyone, but simply because you enjoy the act of drinking it. I folded the letter slower than necessary and tucked it back inside. The drawer closed with a soft click. Outside, laughter. The children at the library were early today. I recognized one of the voices, a boy who always insisted on sitting closest to the storybook, even though he never made eye contact. I reached for my cardigan, the blue one with stretched cuffs. I didn't change clothes for them. I never had to. I picked up the cloth tote bag with its fraying seams. I'd written the word breathe in small letters along one side, back when I still needed reminders. My hand paused on the doorknob. I turned instead, walking to the window. I unlatched it. The wind caught the edge and lifted it a few inches. The scent of lemon blossoms drifted in along with the rustle of branches. A bird chirped. Just one note. I didn't need to check the phone again. I didn't need to return a call or write a message. I didn't need to explain the silence. Once, I was the woman who folded napkins into triangles before anyone sat down, who filled her plate last, made her voice small, smiled when dismissed. I sat at the end of every table so my exit would go unnoticed. I was reliable, replaceable. Whitney used to pat my shoulder on holidays as if I were a delicate pet. You're good at understanding things that aren't said. That was meant as a compliment. My silence had become furniture in their house, polished, well-placed, and always out of the way. Now no one had to adjust their chair around me. Now I could drink my tea while it was hot. Now I could choose not to answer, just because I didn't want to. I traced the lip of my mug with one finger. The crack near the base had darkened over time. I didn't mind. It held the warmth just fine. I heard footsteps outside, probably Nina heading out for her morning walk. She never asked questions that came with strings. She never touched my hair. I used to think reclaiming myself would require speeches, apologies, even revenge. It didn't. It required only a closed door that didn't lock a phone that didn't own me, and a morning like this, quiet, fragrant, and entirely mine. I stood for a moment longer, not moving toward the hallway or the coat rack or the past. There would be another story read aloud today. A girl with a red scarf. A bear who learns how to listen. A page that always sticks together at the corner, but that would come later. For now, I just sat again and sipped and let the air move through the open window. I had once been a mother. I had once been a woman left behind. Now I was simply myself, and this morning belonged to no one else.